Welcome to more World of Warplanes content from the Noble Queue, and in this video I'm going to take an in-depth look at the Tier 6 German heavy, the Messerschmitt ME410 Hornisse. Here's my Messerschmitt ME410 Hornisse, or Hornet in English, on the tarmac outside my hangar. And this is a historical aircraft. It was used by the Germans in World War II with, I don't think it would be unfair to say, moderate success. Certainly it's nowhere near as famous as its British counterpart, the Mosquito. However, in World of Warplanes you wouldn't know that. The Mosquito is a difficult aircraft, and this one has some very powerful features, which we'll get onto during the course of the video. So what we're going to do next is take a look at the statistics in a spreadsheet. If you don't want to look at that, then use the links below the video to skip ahead to another section. So here's the spreadsheet with all of the information for the Tier 6 heavies, and there are 7 of them. I'm going to quickly explain how the spreadsheet works. If you already know, then use the link below to skip ahead to the actual numbers discussion itself. What we have is the M410 in columns C and D, and each of the heavies at Tier 6 occupy 2 columns of their own off to the right. And then down the left we can see the information that you would see in the hangar UI, plus a little bit extra from another source. And in the table itself we have the body of information for the 7 aircraft. Configuration for the comparison is stock, ordnance is mounted where it's available, no equipment, pilot has been sent back to the barracks, and the modules are all top. If you see green on the spreadsheet, it's best in class, as light blue, second best in class, light purple, third best in class. A gold colour behind the name of the aircraft indicates that it's a premium or reward aircraft. And very quickly, if we drop down below, we can see that I reversed the logic using red colours for worst in class. Okay, that's how the spreadsheet works. Let's talk about the aircraft numbers themselves. So let's start with gun armament, the business end of the aircraft, and it's good news. The rating for the M410 is best in class, and it's got cumulative DPS of 600. Sometimes these two things aren't in tandem, but they are in this case. 600 is also best in class. And what we have are 2 30mm cannons, outputting 360 DPS each, rate of fire 240, very healthy, a range of 1890 feet, and an auto aim angle of 2 degrees. Basically, if you're within 2 degrees of the target, the game will correct your aim for you. At least that's how I interpret that. Dispersion angle is 0.6. That's a little bit high for a cannon, and you can see it along here that the cannons on the Lightning and the KI-102 and the 20mm on the Grumman XP50 are actually 0.4, which is actually pretty good. And that's going to tend to imply that you want to do everything you can to improve the accuracy of these guns, marksman 1 and 2 skills for instance, gun sight as equipment. The overheat time is a little bit short at 6 seconds. Firing at greater range or a pair of 20mm cannons, that's useful, doing 180 DPS each, rate of fire 420, range 2,362 feet, which I think, actually glancing through those figures, is pretty much the furthest firing weapon on any of the heavies. Yeah, there's a 2,297 foot on the 20mm on the Grumman XP50, which is just behind it. Again, auto aim angle of 2, dispersion angle 0.4 this time, which is good. Overheat time of 8 seconds, which is pretty reasonable as well. And then at close range, 1,444 feet, you get another 120 DPS off 2 7.92mm machine guns. And again, the dispersion angle is 0.6, and that's actually pretty good for a machine gun. Funny enough, only the Volti XP54's machine guns have a wider dispersion angle, although interestingly they've got an auto aim angle of 5 apparently. Now, the thing to note here is that you've got a wide variety of ranges at which the guns actually hit at. If you can, it'd probably be worth trying to separate out the 20mm and 30mm with buttons and using them independently. There is a small window in which the Mosquito, I believe, will do slightly more damage to an ME410 at a particular distance with its 420mm Hispanos. However, I don't think you really need to worry about that. You're flying so fast that that's not going to be a significant factor. Whilst we're on armament, we can also note that the Hornisse is one of 2 heavies that has a rear gunner, which will act to deter somewhat, perhaps heavily damaged bots, with 48 DPS and a range of 2,133 feet. At least it's slightly better than the rear gunner on the Japanese Ki-102. But basically, all good news. Heavy hitting aircraft, which is exactly what you want, because you'll see later that there are some disadvantages to this aircraft, and this compensates for those to a degree. If we talk about ordnance, it's so-so. It's a bit better than some of the aircraft, the Ki-102, the Grumman XP50, and the faulty XP54 of course carries no ordnance, but it's way behind the Mosquitoes and the Lightnings, which do have true ground attack capability. Now, the Mosquitoes are probably better described as hybrid multi-roles and heavies, hence they have a heavy weapon load. The Lightning is a class apart because it's not only an excellent heavy, although somewhat fragile, it also has excellent ground attacking capability, sometimes overlooked by players, this ability to ground pound in the Lightning. The Hornisse, with these 4 rockets, you're probably looking at 1 gun in placement, or perhaps finishing off targets that are already damaged. Survivability figures. Okay, there's a lot of green here, and that's good. But the figures for the survivability are largely compressed. They're pretty similar for all of the aircraft, with perhaps the exception of the Grumman XP50. So although there is green here, 400 hit points in a game like World of Warplanes is not that different from 360 or 350. Not even significantly different, I would suggest, from the 300 for the Grumman XP50. So take that with a pinch of salt, but they could all be worst in class figures, of course, couldn't they? We move on to airspeed, and it's third best in class. And the fastest is the Volti XP54. And surprisingly, perhaps, the second fastest, although only by a smidgen, is the Grumman XP50 overall in terms of rating. So what have we got here? Well, the cruise speed is actually the second best in class. And the boost duration, again, these are all compressed figures. There are only 2, either 30 seconds or 25 seconds for the heavies. And the ME410 has 30, so that's good as well, I guess. Maximum dive speed is third best in class. Won't surprise you that it's behind the Lightning, but it's also behind the Volti XP54. And you'll probably have noticed I've mentioned the Volti XP54 several times now. It's the elephant in the room. Maneuverability, and this is one of the factors where the ME410 falls down, and this is why you need such heavy weaponry, because basically you need to hit things that are in front of you and try your best not to let them get behind you, because if they do, even if they're a heavy, they're probably going to be able to latch onto you and get onto your tail. At 29, the maneuverability is rated worst in class, even worse than the Mosquitoes, which are pretty much lumbering beasts themselves with all that ordnance. There is one, I suppose, fairly good piece of news. The minimum optimum speed is 256 for the range in which the characteristics don't degrade. It starts there, and possibly it's better that it's the highest in class. You could argue differently, of course, but what that tends to mean is you want to keep this aircraft as fast as possible at all times. Stall speed is 112, and that's not particularly good either, although only the elite players, I would suggest, tend to make use of stall speed as a tactic to avoid enemy aircraft or to get an advantage over them in a fight. And altitude performance is third best in class. It's okay. It's a lot better than the Mosquitoes, but then the Mosquitoes are probably going to be flying lower, doing ground attacking at some point in the game. The XP50, which is really a heavy anti-heavy is how I'll put it, I would guess, actually is hampered by the fact that its altitude performance is also pretty poor. However, the ME410's altitude performance lags behind the Lightning, unsurprisingly, and also the Volti XP54. Look, I've said that name again. And indeed, it's not actually any better than the Ki-102. If we just scroll down very quickly, and we'll have a look for the red. Well, unsurprisingly, the gull armament is very good, so there's no red there. You can see that the survivability figures have compressed. What was all green up the top is also second and third worst in class for a couple of these figures. The airspeed, here's one to actually notice. The boost speed maximum boost speed is actually second worst in class. Only the KI-102 is slower under boost. So try not to let the speed fall. You want to try and keep it as fast as possible at all times, but you're not going to get a great deal out of your 30 seconds of boost in terms of improvement if you're being chased by, for instance, a lightning or perhaps an Volti XP54, although that's not got great boost speed either. It's lightning and the mosquitoes that can really hunt you down. And as you can see, there's an awful lot of red on the manoeuvrability, just to ram home the point that this is not a mobile aircraft. Okay, so where does that place this aircraft, in my opinion? Well, it's a devastating aircraft. Certainly once you get it up at reasonably close to other aircraft, it will easily take out bombers. If you have the opportunity to drop low when you're clearing out a sector, it will easily take out GAAs, and pretty much in a head-on. About the only thing that's going to really threaten it probably is the Volti XP54. Now, I would say that if you keep it high, if you keep it fast, you look to pick off your bombers and your ground attackers. You'll be looking for sectors where those bombers and ground attackers will regularly be going. Mining plants are certainly something to be looking for. This aircraft can do very well. But if you start getting into dogfights with it, you're going to come a cropper. So this truly is meant to be used as a boom and zoomer, and it is a boom and zoom aircraft with this kind of armament and this kind of damage output. Keep it high, fast, try not to turn, stay off the flaps, try to fight in a group, try and defy sectors where you'll find aircraft that you can prey upon, such as bombers and ground attackers, and treat enemy heavies with the greatest of care. You want to catch them when they're not really looking at you and destroy them before they can do anything about it. If you get into a dogfight with them, you're probably going to come a cropper, and if you try and outrun them, there are going to be several that you can't outrun. Okay, so let's go and see how I've set my ME410 up. So here we are back on the tarmac outside my hangar with my ME410. The first thing to note is that my aircraft is specialised, which means I have all of the equipment and consumable slots available. Let's go and see what I've done with them. I've already talked about the need for increasing the accuracy across all three of the weapon groups on this aircraft, the machine guns, the 20mm and the 30mm. Therefore, I've mounted a gun sight. That won't surprise you. Now, there's nothing you can do with the airframe. There's no slot available. You can't improve the speed. You can't improve the manoeuvrability. As this aircraft is not manoeuvrable, worst in class, I've chosen to emphasise speed. Therefore, I've put on the uprated engine to give me better acceleration without boost and better cruise speed, and also the engine boost mixture injection system to give me better acceleration with the boost, and 3.7 maximum speed with boost activated as this piece of equipment is currently configured. As you can see, I've got a bit of calibration to do as well. And just a reminder, the maximum boost speed on this aircraft is a little bit low, so you need to work and try and improve it where you can. Now, it's an interesting situation when you come to forward firing weapons. Straightforwardly, what works for me is gas operated action. You need to kill aircraft in front of you and try not to let them get behind you, because if they do, you're not going to be able to shake them off by using manoeuvres, and you may not be fast enough to get away from them, particularly if they're another heavy. I think putting your shots faster is well, it certainly works better for me. And I've also picked off the cooldown rates, if you look at the orange characteristics in the panel that's on display, and also increased accuracy. Now, there is probably an argument for using any of the other pieces of equipment, and it is going to come down to your personal preference. If we look at reinforced bulk carriers, we can increase the burst length. Well, maybe that will work for you. Maybe if the aircraft, you're finding you're overheating before you shoot down the aircraft in front of you. Personally, if I think they're approaching you, they'll probably get past you before you've managed to go through the entirety of your burst length, and this is why I don't pick this piece of equipment. But it is worth thinking about. May even be worth experimenting with. Perhaps a stronger argument can be made for long gun barrels, and I can think of one of my regular Twitch viewers who probably is jumping up and down if he's watching this video going, no, long gun barrels, what you need is greater range. And that's a strong argument. If you can start hitting aircraft in front of you at a greater range and do damage to them, you've got a better chance of destroying them before they get past you. I don't like the bonus characteristics on the improved long gun barrels, however, so for me gas operated action is the correct choice. But be aware that yours may vary from mine. do think about it. Coming to consumables, two-seater aircraft, so I've got a first aid kit on in order to heal any injured member of crew. I picked the exhaust bleed inerting system. Okay, this aircraft has pretty decent resistance to fire damage anyway, but I don't think the pneumatic control assist and the emergency control system are going to particularly benefit you, so this is probably the best choice I would suggest. Almost mandatory engine cooling to give yourself an extra 10 seconds of boost on top of whatever you happen to have available. I prefer to use engine restart here because basically if you lose your engines, you aren't going to outmaneuver anything behind you. You're basically a dead duck at that point. So that's my preferred choice. And then universal ammunition, of course, I don't ever load gold. So now let's turn our attention to crew skills. And we'll look at the pilot. And my first choice here, given that I would strongly recommend you build this aircraft for speed performance, is aerodynamics expert. That gives you 40% extra effect from your mounted equipment that works on speed. Incidentally, it does it on equipment for manoeuvrability as well, but I haven't fitted in any here and wouldn't recommend that you do. Then I'll be concentrating on the engine guru and marksman skills. Marksman first, so marksman 1 first, then try and get engine guru 1, and then work your way up to marksman 2 and engine guru 2. Now, whilst you have points available, you can see I've got a situation here where I've assigned what was a free skill point to eagle-eyed, mainly because I want to put the point to work whilst I have it, but it can't do anything else. Now I have another free skill point, and I could consider putting on perhaps battle-tested, or indeed aerobatics expert, and without thinking about it too much during the course of the video, I'd probably punt for battle tested, but not with any great enthusiasm. But then I don't want to leave this point doing nothing whilst I'm waiting for a third point to come available, which is when I will then assign them all to marksman 2, and then it will be rinse and repeat to get engine guru 2. Now the gun is not very potent on the ME410. I've picked off a fairly standard set of skills here. Defensive fire to reduce the damage. I think that's probably the first skill to pick if you can, but of course it takes 3 points because that reduces the damage that enemy aircraft will do to you when they're firing at you. The precision gunner is a good choice as well, insofar as it will target vulnerable sections of an enemy aircraft. Now, what will happen particularly is if you're followed by bots and you manage to shoot out the engine, they will turn away generally, and that's useful. Humans probably won't be deterred, but nonetheless, if you can get 2 or 3 critical hits on them, even if they eventually take you down, they may then be in such a poor state, that they're shot down by a member of your team. And then, as I had another pair of points, I got armourer to increase the burst length by 50%. To be truthful, I don't think I've ever noticed the burst length on the rear guns factoring in. They seem to have enormous burst length. I wonder if that's a bug in the game. So maybe I need to reassess that. But unfortunately, it also leads on to the ballistics expert, which increases the range of fire, and that really is quite useful. Perhaps not so much on this plane, but any plane that's got a vicious turret, increasing the range of fire is a really good idea, and you can only get that particular skill by working through this one. Okay, I think it's time to go and see how the ME410 performs in battle. The map for my battle in the ME410 is Road to Rome, and it's the trap variant, which means that it has 5 sectors, but there's no central sector. They're laid out in a pentagon shape, and strategically the mining plant is the most important of them. 3 resources every 5 seconds, of course, like all sectors, but also an additional 80 resources every 120 seconds. There are also 2 command centres, one near each of the spawns, which will call in bomber flights to attack enemy ground targets, definitely the second most important sector strategically, and then also a pair of garrisons which just convey the standard 3 resources every 5 seconds. And tactically, it's pretty much make sure that you've got the mining plant if you can, or at least for longer than the enemy has it during the game, and at least one of the command centres if you want to win this. If we look at the combat group, we can see that I'm bottom tier in my ME410. We have a tier 7 Meteor 1, and look out for him in the battle results. and also an XP-55, which is a Tier 6 aircraft. The enemy team has the benefit of 2 Tier 7s, a Focke-Wulf 190D, which is a pretty good Focke-Wulf, a Ki-84, and then also an XP-55. But crucially, what they don't have is a heavy. And we'll talk about that as we lead into the battle. So when looking at the combat group, or the order of battle, I noted that I was the only human heavy in the game, and there's a mining plant which is strategically the most important sector on the map. The enemy bot bombers will go there over and over again, so I should be able to farm them, at least prevent the capture of the plant by the enemy, and perhaps if I'm lucky even take it. On the way there, I'll do a little bit of work at the command centre to try and take that, but I can't spend too much time doing that. I have a little bit of ordnance, so I decide to go and use it on a gun emplacement right at the start. I aim to use all 4 rockets on this gun emplacement. You'll see I make a mistake, I only fire 3. As it happens, it's enough. There's not much point in using the other rocket. One of the air defence fighters appears in front of me, so I begin to shoot it at it and damage it. Try and stop it from destroying the heavy. That one's gone. Not going to turn with the air defence fighters, going to run away with them. I'm keeping an eye on the sector. I'm rather hoping it's going to get captured in short order, but if not, I'll spend one more pass on the sector and try and help with the capture of this sector. But then I really must go get to the plant. And having helped with the rear gunner at least to destroy the air defence fighter, I decide I have now spent enough time here and I need to get to the plant before the enemy starts making significant inroads to capturing it. Now, there is a reason why my team's struggling to capture the command centre. That will become clear in the battle results. Right on cue, we find a bomber right over the middle of the plant, then another one in the distance. I spend a moment or two deciding which it would be better to attack first, then settle on the Dornier 217. Open up at 1700 feet, quickly get to within 1400 feet, which is where all of the 600 DPS will take effect. And the Dornier doesn't last very long, even with its evasive manoeuvres. Now the A26B is a different kettle of fish. It's going to have a nasty gun, even though it's a rear gunner, because it's also got forward guns. And you'll see that's a feature of this battle throughout. In this case, I catch it in a quarter on attack. I'm able to finish it off in its damage condition fairly quickly. And now I've only got about, well, less than half of my hit points to play with. I've got to be careful here, and that's when I spot a tornado coming in at me. You'll remember I said that it's really important to try and kill anything in front of you and not let it get behind you. And unfortunately, that's exactly what I managed there with the tornado. And that is enough to seal the capture of this sector, the important mining plant. And now it's a question of patrolling, because it won't be long before the enemy bombers start turning up again. Given it's 2-all, can't afford to lose this sector. And then, just as a side, if you look at the minimap, you'll see we still haven't managed to capture our command centre. Weave about a bit, just in case there's any enemy fire from the garrison that I'm not expecting. And then go up to engage the Dornier 217 again. I like flying upside down. Now, the sector is intact. I don't need to wait for anything to get into it, so try and restore its health, as it were, so the Dornier can be shot down safely in free space. Swing around, I'm looking for the A26B. Consider whether I might go for a target of opportunity. There's a tornado in front of me. And then I spot another multi-role below me, which unfortunately has just managed to shoot down a ground attacker. This time I don't kill it, so I employ boost or speed to try and get away from it. That's when I spot that the A26B is now heading back into the plant. Fortunately, I'm fast enough to dissuade the tornado to follow me, but that and the fact it was being engaged by members of my team. And now we've got the somewhat tricky assignment of killing this A26B from behind. This means I'm fully exposed to its rear gunner. This is not ideal, even with 600 DPS. In fact, without 600 DPS, another heavy would struggle to do this. There goes my engine. And also a good half of the health that I had, although I will replenish that with field repairs. I don't bother repairing the engine, even though I could. I don't need to do so at the moment. Why use a consumable when you don't need to? You can bet your bottom dollar that you will need it when it's on cooldown. The Dornier 217 is coming in, so I'll line that up. This is altogether a less lethal bomber. I'm not so worried by this one. And it doesn't last very long. Now we're 3 sectors to 2 down. We've got to think about possibly trying to help to capture another sector. Just possessing 2 sectors, even though one of them is the mining plant, probably won't be enough. So I begin to make my way towards the garrison. That's when I spot the A26B again. It would be nice if I could shoot it down whilst it's in the garrison, but it's probably made its way too far towards the edge before I can do that. I take a good half of its health in the forward approach, and then begun to suffer the effects of its rather good rear gunner again. Once again, the engine is gone. The pilot has been shot out. I have to use my medical kit. And again, the A26B takes half my health. It's a good job that nobody else was engaging me at the same time as the A26. That would have been very difficult. This time I'm closer to the garrison. The Dornier 217 is now flying over it, and I feel there's a good chance that I'll be able to kill it whilst it's in the sector. Here we go. Nice and close, full 600 DPS. Just readjust to get the full aim on. And down it goes. That's half the sector captured, and we do need it. So now I go down to see what else I can shoot at. That turns out to be a P-38F. We've nearly got the sector. We decide to go down and help what I think is the XP-55, but he disposes of an air defence aircraft, and now we have the sector. So it's time to kill the A-26 again. Oh, look at that, my engine's been shot out. Fortunately the pilot wasn't taken this time, so I didn't have accuracy issues. And by now I've already got the grade 1 heavy fighter. The XP-55 obligingly flies straight at me, not a good idea with my DPS. First time I've seen a ground attacker. I suppose that was a kill steal from the XP-55 there, but I see the other ground attacker and go off to make sure that it can't do any damage to the plant whilst we build up a little bit of a lead. Talking of the scores, we can see it's 556 to 504 as it was then. And that's largely because I've made sure the plant has stayed in our possession for the entire of the game. There's the Maguire medal. Winged Legend will come up shortly. We did eventually capture the command centre local to our spawn. It looks like it's going to fall to the enemy bomber flight. I know that there's still a chance that the mining plant could come under serious threat from the remaining aircraft in the combat group, so I choose to, pardon me, to make sure that there's no chance of it being flipped to the enemy. There's at least an A26B that I'm going to have to kill once more. You will excuse me, I'm going to leave that in. There's the A26B. And this time, once I kill him, I won't have to worry about him anymore. This time it's a head-on attack, which is more comfortable for me. I take about half of its health. It will take him time to get his guns on me, by which time I'd hope to have largely killed him. And in fact, he probably was shooting at the aircraft alongside me. And that's the end of the bomber threat to the plant. I look up and see that we've had a count off the plant and realise that 2 sectors is enough. I've just got a patrolling brief to make sure that we're not threatened on any sector. Spoilers, that is actually the end of the game. There's nothing more that I do here. So let's just review what I did. I worked out at the start of this battle that the mining plant was critical to the winning of this game. That I was the only heavy, and therefore I could farm the enemy bombers and with luck both capture and retain the plant for the entirety of the game, and that proved to be the case, and it was enough to win the game, along with a little bit of help from the XP-55 who managed to take the command centre eventually, and also an enemy garrison. And for that I'm rewarded with a Class 1 heavy game with 4 epic achievements and 15,500 personal points. So let's take a look at the battle result, and as we can see from the centre, it's a 5 chevron battle or a grade 1 heavy fighter, grossing 80,296 credits, of which about 27,000 were due to the premium account bonus. We drop into the message box, we can see there were no expenses, the aircraft wasn't shot down, so there were no repair costs, and prepaid consumables were used. Experience 6,042 with various bonuses, as you can see there. 302 free experience, I think this was the first battle of the day and it's ×3, and a premium account bonus as well. Epic achievements, Maguire's, Winged Legend, McCampbell's, and a Hero of the Sky, and 2 of those netted tokens. Turning to the personal score tab, we can see that all of the class specific missions were completed, and therefore earning the 5 chevrons. 15,490 personal points, illustrating that personal points and class specific mission achievements aren't necessarily linked. 3 sectors captured, 15 aerial targets destroyed. Damage to aerial targets 9,731 with 30 criticals coming off the cannons and the weaponry. 400 capture points. They were split 120 for defending and 280 for attacking. 1 ground target destroyed, 2,502 damage for that. Look at the team score tab, we can see that was enough for first place both by personal points and by chevrons. We had an absentee in the battle, so that makes it an even better win. And on the enemy team, decent contributions from the KI-84 and the Focke-Wulf 190D. So that concludes my look at the Messerschmitt Me410 Hornisse. First, I'd like to thank YouTube subscriber Clash Gamer for requesting this aircraft. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. Secondly, I'd like to thank all of you who've been expressing your sympathy and support for me during this very difficult time with my father. Keep him in your prayers, he will need it during the next few days. What we saw in this game is certainly one aspect of this aircraft's attributes being employed to the full, that is its ability to boom and zoom and destroy bombers whilst in the capture and defence of important sectors. Try and make sure that you kill everything in front of you, and I'm sure that you'll have equally as good, if not better, games. Well, I hope you found that useful, and that if you did, you'll come and see my future content. But until then, this is a tired Noble Q signing out.